Everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us on our webinar today. With us, we have the founder and CEO of Canadian Fertility Consulting, Leia Swanberg, and she has some great information for you today on how you can project manage your journey. Before we get started, I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping items. My name is Jordan, and I'm the marketing manager for CFC. I wanted to let you know that we are recording this webinar today, so everyone who registered will be sent a recording of this later, along with email helpful resources for you. And in the event that you have any internet connection issues, please just call in using a phone and the phone number that is on your registration email. All right. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. I'll pass it over to you, Leia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time today to be a part of this webinar. For me, working for being a surrogacy agency, I obviously have a bias that I like to put out there right away, which is I truly believe there is a need for someone to project manage your journey. And whether that is an agency, which we do well and lots of agencies do well, or whether that's you managing it yourself, it's really important that when looking at a surrogacy journey, whether independently or through an agency, that you are able to manage the journey. You are able to gain back some of the control, in a situation that often feels unmanageable, uncontrollable. Often people come to us after having, infertility struggles or the inability to have the match that they believed would happen with a friend or family member move forward. And so I want to give you some tools, whether you are working independently with a friend or family member or someone you've met online, or whether you're working with an agency. It's all important. It is so important that you are running your journey, that you are understanding all of the moving parts, and that you are able to put those parts in place at any given time, as your journey unfolds. So first I want to talk about planning, because there's nothing to execute if nothing's been planned. And so the first piece, and the piece I always suggest, is to look at, when do you want to become parents? Many of you are saying, hey, I wanted to be a parent yesterday. I'm ready now. While others are saying, you know what, in 2 years, I would love to have a child in 2 years. So when we look at surrogacy in Canada, generally speaking, the wait time is, 6 to 9 months to locate or identify a surrogate candidate. So when we look at sort of that 9 months, paired with, if you're creating embryos, doing that during that sort of 9-month waiting period, 9 months of pregnancy, we're there at about 18 months. And when we look at the average journey, either of ours or in surveys that we've run across the board, people working with agencies or independently in Canada, they've all said that their journey, sort of the average time, was between 18 and 24 months. So 2 years really is what we're looking at. The next piece I really can't stress enough is to figure out how much money you're going to need, and then to add sort of a 15% cushion on top of that amount. And that 15% cushion really gives you the ability to backtrack. It gives you the ability to move forward if you have a match that doesn't go forward and you've sort of invested some money there, whether it be in legal fees or screening of a surrogate or a donor. It's really important to just kind of have that buffer in place. The next piece, in the project management of your journey, and sort of the first piece I always suggest is find a lawyer. Find a lawyer in the jurisdiction in which you live, whether that's, within Canada or outside of Canada, to really understand the legal process, to understand what you need to put in place with your surrogate, with the legal agreement. Can your surrogate be married? Does she need to be single? what that's going to look like for you. And further to that, if you're working with an egg donor, does where you live acknowledge an egg donor who is not known to you? Does the country in which you live require an anonymous donation? These are important questions that can impact and, unfortunately crumple your journey if you make that misstep. So speaking to a lawyer in your jurisdiction, and then speaking to one, if you're an international client listening to this webinar, then finding a lawyer in Canada. So if you're a Canadian, you're just going to find one lawyer. And a lawyer in Canada is going to explain to you the legislative changes that are coming here in June of 2020, and what that looks like in terms of your surrogate's reimbursements, what that looks like in terms of the requirement of the agency that you work with, and if you're not working with an agency, the requirement that is on you. And when I talk about the requirement that is on you, it's not to say that this is some big, complicated, complex matter, or that you need an agency, or that you need someone to manage it. However, what is important on this piece is that all receipts are saved that are pregnancy related and related to your journey. That your surrogate fills out a declaration form, which it can be found on Health Canada's website, that is signed every month, that you have a copy of that, and you keep the receipts, the signed declaration for 7 years from the end of your journey. So it's really important that either the agency you're working with or if you're doing it independently, that you really just have great records. We have at CFC have just developed an app. We've spent a year developing it that will in real time tabulate your surrogate's receipts, extrapolate the information to show her what she has submitted versus what has been accepted, so that at all times everyone can see, sort of where we're at month to date or journey to date. And so we really, really suggest, having a strong understanding of these new legislative changes to ensure that you as intended parents are protected. The next piece is finding a fertility clinic. Why is that more important than a surrogacy agency, an egg donor agency? It's most important because you need to know that you can be a genetic contributor to your child, or that you can't be, and therefore you will look for an egg or sperm donor. But without that information, without that health checkup, without a semen analysis, without some ultrasound and blood draws to look at your potential for a large yield of eggs, surrogacy or egg donation or managing a project may not even be a thing. And so we want to get you into a clinic right away. When we look at managing the clinic, what are we even talking about? I mean, I'm not a doctor. I don't know what I should be asking them. It's important that you become an informed consumer, because there is no white coat syndrome when you're an informed consumer. When we hear about this white coat syndrome, or people going into a doctor and freezing and not knowing what to ask, or how to move forward with the questions that they do have, sort of crumpled up in a piece of paper in their pocket, I suggest taking notes. I suggest watching the webinar that I did on choosing a fertility clinic. I suggest, asking in groups on Facebook or other groups that you're in, what makes your clinic great. In the US, we have the CDC and SART data that really provides, success rates of clinics. Now, the only issue with that is it's not always clear when there's a surrogate and a donor. But looking at that data, becoming educated, what is important to you at a clinic? Success rates, obviously, that's super important. But is it important that your clinic offers a guaranteed program? So you pay one fee until you have a live birth. Research, talk to clinics, ask clinics that you're interested in if they have that. Looking at clinics in Canada and the US and really weighing out what makes sense. Currently, with border closures and COVID being sort of such a greater issue in the US, we are really suggesting to people to stay, if you're going to engage in a surrogacy or donor process in Canada, to stay at a clinic in Canada. However, with that being said, if you really want to work with a US clinic because you want to access services that aren't available in Canada, such as gender selection, we understand that as well and can sort of have a further talk about how to project management or project manage in another country at this point. Okay, next, let's talk about the selection of an egg donor agency and the selection of an egg donor. So first, really important to talk to your clinic, because now you've got a lawyer, got a clinic. Talk to your lawyer in Canada. Hey, do you know any egg donor agencies that are great? And hey, clinic, what egg donor agency do you work? I hope that both of them will say Egg Helpers, which is the agency that I founded and that my husband Scott runs. That would be great news for us. And if they tell you that, that's fantastic. And if they don't and they give you another name, that's fine too. Project managing an egg donor agency is the same regardless of the agency. And what is most important, sorry, my nose. What is most important to understand when working with an egg donor agency is that egg donation is a very human process. It is, a very intimate process. Should you decide to have a known donor, it is a very private process. Should you choose to have an anonymous donor, we have a webinar tomorrow on just that. We're going to have a counselor, Jan Silverman, speak about egg donation, how to share it with your family. But to really, before you even engage the donor agency, really sort of let it sink in, drop into that that place of curiosity in yourself, open yourself up to your partner if you have a partner, to have that conversation, to really talk about whether or not an anonymous or a known donor makes sense for you. Once you've decided, you'll be able to share that information with your egg donor agency and you'll begin looking at donors. As you begin looking at donors, has she donated before? What is her availability? Does she live in close proximity to your clinic, or will you be organizing travel for her to get to your clinic? All of those pieces are important. And really, letting your agency know, your donor agency know that you want to be involved. You want to be, working with them on, on solutions for any issues that would arise, and that you'd like to be kept abreast of anything that's going on with your cycle. So you have selected an egg donor. What's next? Your egg donor agency will send a match sheet to your clinic, and your nurse will follow up with you. If your nurse hasn't followed up with you, follow up with her. Try to book a call. Hey, nurse, I know that my donor agency has sent through a match sheet for a donor that we're working with. We're very excited. We also want you to know that we would like to be very involved in the donor process. And when I talk about very involved, this is what it looks like for me. It means that when your donor goes for screening, setting clear expectations for the nurse of what you require is important. Nurse, I would love to hear after our donor has gone for her new patient appointment, I would like an update on when you anticipate she'll start medication. I would like to have a few follow-ups up until day 7 of stimulation, because I want to ensure that after the donor has been taking medication for 7 days, if the cycle isn't going as planned, I would like the opportunity to let you know that I will not be moving forward any further with the donor. And what does that look like? What does that look like financially? Having that call up front, getting those questions answered, really, really important, because having those talks ahead of time, and letting the nurse know, you are not a passenger, you are the driver, and reminding her of that and sort of sending her a few emails here and there will really allow you to make empowered decisions and educated decisions as you move forward with this process. So great news, you have embryos. What's next? So you may have started your search for a surrogate already, or you may decide to start now. When we look at, the process of finding a surrogate and managing that, what I always suggest to people is to really look at what your immovable values are. What pieces of the journey are, so important that there's just no budging. And so that may be your values around termination for a medical abnormality. That may be your budget. Your budget may just be, this is how much money we have. And so when you're looking at a surrogate, to really look at what her bed rest costs could be, because that is one area of a journey that, despite our best efforts, we can never manage, because, it is a human process, and pregnancy is risky and things come up, and we want to make sure that as things move forward for you, that you have all of the information in order to make decisions that best suit your needs. So when you are speaking to potential surrogates, if you're going independently, having the conversations right up front around termination, selective reduction, wage loss, those pieces, type of contact during, type of contact after the pregnancy is completed, having those conversations. If you're working with an agency, have those conversations with your case manager to make sure that she really understands what you are and aren't looking for. It is very tough to, these conversations are very tough because they're very personal. And so oftentimes people will work with an agency so that those pieces they don't have to project manage. They have someone else that they can empower to do so. And so, it may be as simple as, hey, case manager, here are some things we're willing to budge on, whether it's the location of the surrogate, her location, or type of contact that she's looking for throughout. However, wage loss, we can't budge on, nor can we budge on termination of a pregnancy. And so, really having someone to bounce those ideas off of. I hear so often, I'd like to have a surrogate that lives in my community, which is lovely. And of course, you'd be able to attend appointments easily, and that could be a good thing. However, there is often an expectation post-birth that you will be sort of connected because you live around the corner from each other, which, we can never anticipate. And so, generally I suggest to people to open their location criteria as great as possible in order to maximize their chance of a successful match. Okay, so if you are working independently, I'm just going to give you my list of suggestions. So start a surrogacy only email address, and that's even if you're working with an agency, or just having one email address that the clinic communicates with, your agency or your surrogate communicates with. Having that is a really great way to keep everything in one place. If you post an ad looking for a surrogate on Facebook, make sure to reply to every ad, even if the person does not sound to be a fit. It's a very small community in the surrogacy world, and I think just having that, gracious reply, thank you so much, unfortunately, we're looking for this or that, will really, really go a long way. Create a document that you'll send to your surrogate. This is if you're going independently, where she'll fill out all the information that you need for the clinic, for the lawyer, once you decide that you're going to move forward. So, getting all of her details, her address, her date of birth, her health card, her, a pay stub for the lawyers, getting all of that information so you have it in one place that you can then send to the particular parties that, that you'll need. Find out, I want to just backtrack prior to the, having her fill out the document. Find out that she meets your clinic's criteria. So each clinic, and I mean each clinic, has their very own criteria for what they deem acceptable in terms of a surrogate. So find out what your clinic's criteria are so that when you are interviewing surrogates, whether it's through an agency or independently, you're not wasting time, yours or hers, that you are making sure that she will meet the clinic's criteria. Get on Skype, meet with her, talk to her, let her know that you are going to be a very active participant in this journey and that you are excited to partner with her. Because not only do we need you to project manage, we need her to project manage when it comes to the pregnancy, birth planning, all of those pieces, because she's done pregnancy herself, but most likely she has not been a surrogate yet. And so, all of those moving parts as well are very important. Okay, so I want to get to the good stuff. As you're going through this process, it's important to check in with one another if you have a partner. It's important to check in with your surrogate. It's important to check in with your care provider, with your lawyer, and that's really how they will know that you are an active participant. They will know because you are continually communicating with them, to ensure that they understand what your expectations are. The surrogacy, the egg donor journey, from managing the pieces at the clinic with your donor, and then once you have a surrogate, managing those pieces with the clinic for your surrogate. So again, asking them to send you follow-up emails after she's had appointments at the clinic, especially if you're abroad. Asking them, why? Why does my surrogate need to be on these types of medications? Why, why does my surrogate need to, have this ultrasound or not have this ultrasound, or, or whatnot? Really, really ask. Be an informed consumer. We find that people who are, actively asking and curious, I'm really curious. And when you start with that, I find everyone is very receptive because, your curiosity, you're wondering about the clinic process, the legal process, whatever that looks like, really shows how deeply you care and how invested you are in this process. One other piece that I'd like to talk about is the guaranteed programs. I've had many questions and I'm just checking my questions now. And sorry about that. Many clinics will ask you about, these guaranteed programs I mentioned earlier. Get the paperwork. Don't just commit. If a clinic is telling you their success rate is, quite high, in the 80s, 80% success rate, first try, we hear that a lot. If you go with the guarantee, the worst piece of that is that you're going to pay double, for success. But if you don't go with a guaranteed and you're of that 20%, of the people that it doesn't work for first time or second time, or whatnot, it's really important that, for many people that they have that safety net. My suggestion always, my suggestion is to speak to your clinic about what that looks like. So what is included in their guaranteed package? What isn't included in their guaranteed package? And making sure that that it all makes sense. Making sure that the document, sorry, my apologies, my computer's dying. Making sure that that your lawyers reviewed this document. You're making a huge investment in the clinic, and making sure that investment makes sense both financially and legally. Understanding, where the escape route is should you not be successful in your journey. And so we always suggest having someone to read that that guaranteed information. Once your surrogate is pregnant, working with her to manage her physician or midwife, ensuring that you're getting information on the pregnancy. And so that's usually as simple as having her sign a document at the doctor's office or care provider's office that is going to allow you to communicate directly with her care provider. And, when it comes to the birth and managing and birth planning and, all of that, we also have a great webinar on birth planning that helps to really ensure that not only are you involved, but that you are an active participant in the birth of your child. It's such an amazing experience. And, oftentimes when we speak to clients who maybe are disappointed about, the birth or, the end of their journey, and we speak to them about why, they say, well, I didn't think to ask, or I didn't understand, or I didn't appreciate, or I didn't know. And so we want you to be empowered. We want you to be, as involved as you are comfortable throughout your entire pregnancy and, throughout the birth and post-birth time period with your baby. And so as you move through those processes, whether it's, finding a lawyer, finding the clinic, deciding on a guaranteed package or not, selecting an egg donor, managing that process, really sorting out for yourselves what are deal breakers for you in terms of finding a gestational carrier. All of that is so vital to the success of your journey, and also to how you will walk away from this process feeling as though you were an empowered participant, that you were in the driver's seat, that you were able to move through this process, really feeling as though you were a part of it. Post-birth, again, you're going to be managing, based on where you live in the world, whether it's in another province in Canada or outside of Canada, you're really going to be required to make some decisions around the birth registration process. And, will you wait to travel back to your province to take care of that? Or will you have a lawyer in the province in which your surrogate delivers? Or if you're traveling abroad, will you complete paperwork in Canada and have your child travel home on their Canadian passport? Or will you visit an embassy or consulate in Canada? And, all of those pieces, as you begin to move through the process, having all of the information, and, that information really will allow you to make decisions that are best for you, because each client that we work with, their their situation is slightly different. So if you are a single person versus a same-sex male couple versus a heterosexual couple, the birth registration process can look slightly different. And so we want to make sure that if you are from outside of Canada, that birth registration process is as you imagined it would be in the beginning when you did your research and you found your lawyer in your community, found a lawyer in Canada, and began the process. So I really wanted to keep it to 30 minutes, so I didn't sort of over talk, although I felt like I shared a bunch of information. And Jordan, if anyone has questions, I would be more than happy to answer them now.
Hi, Leah. Yes, we have some questions here. First one that's come in, they were wondering, who should we start with first? Should we start with the clinic, the lawyer, the agency, and what you recommend?
Sure. So I often suggest a lawyer in their jurisdiction. So if they're Canadian, a Canadian lawyer. If they're from outside of Canada, a lawyer that specializes in surrogacy where they are. Now, often we get questions, from clients in countries where surrogacy is illegal, and they're often afraid to speak to a lawyer, or they don't know where to look. Feel free to email me. I can point you in the right direction. We know lawyers sort of all over the place. And there are lawyers in France, in Spain, in Italy, in Australia, everywhere that we've ever had a client that we've encountered, there have been lawyers who manage that surrogacy piece first. So I really believe that's where you should start, as you need to ensure that you can engage in a surrogacy in Canada prior to engaging.
Great, thank you. The next question that's here, they would like to know, how is Canada managing surrogacy through the COVID-19 pandemic?
Excellent question. We are, so fortunate in Canada in that the clinics have reopened, and so they are beginning to screen surrogates. They are beginning to plan transfers. They're beginning to screen egg donors. They're beginning to plan egg retrievals. And so our process has resumed. There were these last couple of months where we were all waiting very patiently for clinics to reopen. And so it was giving intended parents and surrogates a great opportunity to kind of just settle into the match and settle into their relationship. But clinics have resumed. And in terms of post-birth, again, I feel super fortunate to be in Canada, and there's a webinar that that Jordan can send out to you or link in the comments that is on Canada's response to COVID-19. And so the moment that myself and Cindy Wasser and her and I sort of got on the phone as we heard the border was closing, reached out to a member of parliament that we've worked with on a number of projects, Anthony Housefather, and asked for his advice. He put us in touch with the right people and at Immigration Canada and Global Affairs. And if you can imagine, in 9 days, a law was changed and exemptions were made for all people traveling to Canada to meet their babies. And we have had every client that has applied for these exemptions get into Canada with the help of an amazing immigration lawyer, Stephen Green, who has taken, he and his colleagues, and Alexandra Cole is the lawyer that we've sort of been working with lots as well. Their firm has been able to get these exemptions, get everybody into Canada, and not one person, knock on wood, so far has missed the birth of their baby.
Great, thank you. I just sent out the link to that webinar that Leah mentioned on Canada's response to surrogacy during COVID-19. It's in the chat. It'll also be included in the email afterwards. One more question here for you, Leah. Are there any other webinars that you could recommend everyone watching today to also check out, in addition to this COVID one and the one that you mentioned on planning the birth process?
Absolutely. There's a webinar on building a relationship with your surrogate. There's a webinar on selecting an egg donor. There are so many great webinars that we've done lately just with this lockdown, you know, we've been not traveling as much as we do. So we have a great selection of webinars that I would suggest watching, and really, again, becoming an informed consumer. You know, we see it as thoughtful. We see it as commitment. We see it as, you know, ensuring your comfort level. And so any service provider that you work with, you know, watch more than just their answer. Watch their response to your curiosity. You know, because it is important that they understand that, you know, what's important to you really needs to be important to them.
Great. Thank you, Leah. That's all of our questions for today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jordan.
Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And yeah, we'll make sure to include links to all of those other webinars in the email along with the recording from today. Thanks again.